Just want to acknowledge today is Rosh Hashanah, it's the Jewish New Year, actually. In the Hebrew tradition, it's actually called Yom Hadin, the Day of Judgment. It's really fitting. I'd love for there to be a Truth and Reconciliation Committee. I don't know if we're going to get to do reconciliation today, but at least we can start with some truth-telling. And in the wake of the war, several polls were taken, and they found consistently that the Jewish-Israeli population of Israel, 95% of them found that the war, stated that they felt that the war was justified, the incursion, the attack, the assault on Gaza. Only 3% of the Jewish-Israeli population found that it was excessive. So you've heard, and you're going to hear some more about the primary victims of this operation, and I'm going to speak to what occurred in Israel proper, in the internationally recognized borders of Israel, both to what happened to the Palestinian population inside of Israel and what the Jewish population in Israel was doing. You had, and you still have, twice a week at least, Death to Arabs marches in Jerusalem. At this point, you go to downtown Jerusalem, Thursday night, Saturday night, nights that in Israel generally people are out on the street, in bars, in restaurants, walking around pedestrian, horseways, and you will not find Palestinians. Those areas have been successfully ethnically cleansed by gangs of Jewish thugs who roll, maybe 10, 12, 15, 20 deep, and just march through downtown areas, harassing, picking on, insulting, and physically attacking non-Jewish people, specifically Palestinians, to the point where, unopposed by any serious police presence, they've successfully scared off the Palestinian population of Jerusalem. And they're trying to do this in other cities as well. So far, they've only succeeded in Jerusalem. How did we get there? How did we get to the point where this is the status quo in Jerusalem? For years, there's been serious incitement to racism from top Israeli leaders, political leaders, religious leaders, cultural leaders, academic leaders. Some of it you may have heard about, and a lot of it you probably haven't heard about. And part of the reason that you haven't heard of it is the same reason that it's not prosecuted, or one of the reasons it's not prosecuted, and that a lot of it is coded messages. I mean, if I say, I hate these people are evil, that's a very obvious description that anyone can identify as racist, but the way that it's often done in Israel is encoding it in religious jargon by using Toranic and Talmudic expressions or references. They send a message to people who are familiar with those tropes. The message is conveyed, yet for people who are unfamiliar, it just goes over their heads. And Israel's incitement to racism law, when it was passed in the 80s, actually the founding father of Israeli Zionist fascism, Meir Kahane, he actually supported the law. This man, who was the most racist figure practically in the history of the state, he supported it, and the reason why is because there was a loophole encoded into the law which said if you incite to racism, but if it's couched in religious terms, if it's part of a religious discourse, then you're exempted. It's not prosecutable. And so you have serious, incitement to racism using religious tropes. So in recent years, leading up to this war, you have hundreds of chief rabbis from all across the country, and these are, of course, state-sponsored, paid by my taxes, right? Authoring religious edict, instructing Jews that it's a sin, that they are not permitted to even rent apartments to non-Jews. And to justify this, they reference a phrase, a verse from the Bible that there's a call to ethnic cleansing in Deuteronomy 7, chapter 7. So in this way, there's no punishment, they keep their jobs, in fact their budgets are increased within months, and yet people stop renting. If the few people or the people that were renting before, they're now not renting, apartments. So again, cleansing the society of non-Jewish presence. You have, in recent years, the authoring of a book called The King's Torah, again by a state-sponsored rabbi, the head of a state-sponsored yeshiva. And this book, The King's Torah, Torat HaMelech, talks explicitly under what situation, under what conditions are we allowed to kill non-Jews. And basically, pretty much any, I'm not going to be going through the slides one by one, but over the time, the people who have their finger on the keyboard of the laptop are going to be showing slides that I've put together, amassed, of some of the most insidious quotes by leading Israeli officials. And you'll see that this King's Torah describes that even Palestinian babies can be killed under the if you suspect that one day they will grow up to be a threat to you. What kind of sick mentality underwrites permission? This is the rabbi that we're talking about, Yitzhak Shapira. If you go to the next slide, you'll see there's justification for killing babies. Okay? Once those 3 teenage Israeli Jewish boys were kidnapped and the government ramped up, the tension, and then you had the discovery of their bodies, and then it just spilled. It was over the top. I mean, from all sectors. You had politicians, like some that you're more familiar with. You've heard of Ayelet Shaked, whip of one of the government factions, calling for, killing the entire Palestinian nation. All Palestinian people, including mothers and children, are snakes, and the mothers are also culpable, and they should all be destroyed. But in addition, you had some of this coded language that was really, really, really sick stuff. For example, you had the head of the largest Jewish religious youth group in the world, Bnei Akiva, the world head of the organization, saying that the army should go out, not just kill 300 Palestinians or more, but take their foreskins and bring them back as trophies. And then you have the city councilor of Jerusalem, who was in charge of security for the city of Jerusalem, calling out, saying that, calling to hundreds of thousands of ultra-Orthodox Jews who was assembled in front of them, and he said, we have to commit acts of Phineas. Go out and commit acts of Phineas. The rabbis want us to. Well, again, coded language. What's Phineas? If you go into the Bible, then you read that Phineas was a zealot, a religious zealot, who, upon learning that there were miscegenators, Israelites who had intimate relationships with non-Israelite women, he came and he murdered them both by shish kebabbing them, taking a sword and killing them both. And this is like an act that is revered. He's saying, yes, go out and do this. Okay? And this isn't just words that go out into the air. Then Netanyahu takes it over the top and comes on, and says, yes, we need to take vengeance. Vengeance, And so sure enough, a group of Jews went out and they kidnapped a young boy and beat him and poured gasoline down his throat and burned him to death from the inside out. Okay? And this is what's happening on the streets of Israel. Now, of course, once it got to that point where you have people like out and out lynching people, not just beating them up, but actually, burning them, then, of course, this bloodletting had to come out, So now the Netanyahu charges the army with taking out the rage that's coursing through the veins of society. And then, as Max spoke and Muhammad will speak and explain to you the horrors that were inflicted on the people of Gaza. But I just also felt it was important that you know that also Palestinians specifically and non-Jews in general in Israel are on the run because of incredibly vicious incitement, hateful rhetoric. And I should just add that not only is there this hateful rhetoric, and not only are there no repercussions, but even when there are any efforts to stem it, because surely there are some Israelis who are repulsed by these sayings, and when you have an effort by a member of the Knesset, a liberal member of the Knesset, to pass a law saying just 1 hour of the week we should have anti-racist education in the schools, the entire government voted against it. Just 1 hour a week. But no, they didn't even want to have that, because these sentiments feed into their political aspirations, you know, and more racism feeds into ultranationalism, which feeds into more votes for them. And I don't see any lever in society. As someone who lives in Jewish Israeli society, I do not see any force that can roll back this tide of hatred. So unfortunately, or fortunately, I support calling upon international bodies to stop participating, stop ignoring, stop allowing, stop permitting this to continue to take place. You are weakening those few Jewish Israelis, and of course Palestinian Israelis and Palestinians who are not Israelis, all the people who live in the country, who want to be able to live together, who want to be able to live in peace as equals. You are sapping us of strength by your silence and by permitting this to continue and papering over it with your silence. Thank you.
Blasphemous.